it's your girl Kia G, just coming to you all today, welcoming you to Queendom, yes, where we're always adding jewels to your crown. All right, let's start adding. Hey Queens, we're back with another episode for Queendom Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about the Black vote. So who I have with me is a historian, Cortney Hawkins, is here with us today as our special guest, and we're going to dive in and start talking about a little bit about the Black vote, okay? So first, Cortney, what I would like for you to do is just give us a little background about who you are, so our viewers can know who Cortney is.
Hi, I'm Cortney Hawkins. Like Mr. Kidd said, I am a historian. I'm a graduate of Troy University, and I'll be receiving my Juris Doctorate degree from Birmingham School of Law on May 21.
Yay! Okay, graduate. All right, so let's dive in about voting. What started your interest in going to the polls and voting?
So ever since I can remember being a little girl, I've always gone to the polling stations with my parents or grandparents. So seeing them, it was something that was a custom. It wasn't something out of the norm. It was something that was expected. Whenever any election came about, I knew I was going with my parents. I knew exactly where they both voted. I knew where my grandparents voted because we literally went to the polls.
Okay.
So that got my interest and piqued in what voting is, but also because my love for history.
Okay. So when we talk about what voting is it, I mean, of course, back in the day, it used to be Democratic, Republican Party. It was based up on party shifts, but now I think it's a little bit more, we're voting differently. And what does it look like, the difference from the back then versus now?
Ooh, so it's very different because when you look at history, you look at different parties. And one of the parties that everybody knows are the Republican and Democratic Party. And what sometimes people don't understand is the way the platforms change. So the Republican Party that we know now used to be the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party now is what used to be the Republican Party, but again, they switched platforms. So when they hear people that say they're a Black Republican or a Black Democratic, most of those things are integrated based off where history is. So now when you look at it today, you're looking at such a really diverse Democratic or Republican Party that is way different than when the Founding Fathers first got into these things of parties. And in fact, parties aren't something that even actually are needed in the world today. And George Washington actually warned against bipartisan parties because they felt like they didn't represent most candidates' viewpoints, but just a small area of it.
Okay. So when we're thinking about candidates and we're trying to decide on our ballot of which direction we're gonna go, how do we line up so we can make sure that we're voting who we, for what we want or for who we want?
So I definitely highly recommend you have to do research. That is something that's very important. I mean, even before they announced that they're going to be presidents or mayors, there's something that they've done in the community before they got to that spot. Even with President Trump, people knew who he was, so that gave him a way to get in there. So you're able to do research on whatever President Trump did before he became President Trump. Similar with President Obama. Before then, he was a senator. So you're able to track down the history of people. So that is something that you should be able to do at all times. And with cell phones now, with everybody having cell phones, access to social media, it doesn't take long to Google information about anybody.
True. So local, our local people, our local officials and officiants, how much of a part does it play? Because I guess what I'm saying is I hear that the presidency is really not, it's important, but it's not as important as our local vote in our community.
So I would disagree with that statement on my own personal belief because I think all voting matters and people have to understand. What I think what people try to say is when they look at local votes, these are things that are going to impact you immediately at a faster rate.
Gotcha.
So for instance, when you go to the polls and you're looking at property taxes or something in a certain areas, that's important to vote on because that's going to affect you in that city. It's not something that's going to affect you on a national level, but it's going to affect you directly in your community.
Right. How do we hold our local officials accountable?
Oh, there's plenty of ways. You have to go to meetings, town
Okay.
hall meetings. You need to join your community, neighborhoods, associations. And another thing is that you need to write. You know, some of the things that people forget is that writing is almost like a lost art.
Yeah, true.
So if you don't want to write a letter, fine, send an email. But from my understanding, and I could be wrong, but one letter from one person represents almost 100 people.
Okay.
And if you get that, then okay, yeah, that's somebody else that may feel that way.
Mhm.
And then you get somebody else to write a letter. So that's 2 letters. But again, what you start seeing is that somebody feels that something is important, and that's how you hold your political officials accountable.
Okay. So for the black vote, how do we motivate our black people to get out and vote?
So I think we're doing a great job of getting out and vote. I think people do not give credit where credit is due.
Okay.
But I believe the black vote is becoming something that's becoming very powerful in today's society. Just alone with Senator Doug Jones, the reason why he was able to win that election because black women came out to vote at a very high rate.
True.
And that was something that, you know, pinpoint everywhere. That was something that was state, you know, but nationally so many people were watching that election. And so I think people have to understand that black people are getting out there to vote.
Okay.
And I think people just misinterpret maybe past elections, but you also have to consider the issues of voting when it comes to black people as well.
Okay. So what are some of the issues when it comes to black people voting?
Well, again, blacks have started to be able to vote right after the 14th Amendment. I'm sorry, the 15th Amendment.
Okay.
And with that voting, you started seeing things such as poll taxes, you know, but then you also had the 19th Amendment, which gave white women the right to vote. And so what that did to the black man's vote underneath the 15th Amendment is that it canceled out their vote almost. Because typically during this time, during the women's suffrage movement, or women would tend to vote whatever their husband was voting
Right,
with.
correct.
So 2 votes versus 1 vote is always going to cancel it out. So you have the 19th Amendment that kind of sort of hindered the black man's vote, you know. And then you also have things such as poll taxes, but then you have things also where you had to have property rights. You have to have somebody vouch for you. It was so many of these constant hard things to get out there and vote, and that was something that people have to understand, that those things still deter people to this day.
Okay. So that sounds like voter oppression.
Yes.
Suppression. Okay. So back then, they say our ancestors, they fought a good fight of trying to make sure that we have a right to vote. And in the struggles that they went through to vote. How do you feel that has changed now for us as young African American black people to vote?
Well, I would say one issue that young blacks are facing right now is with the DMVs.
Okay.
Because again, in order to vote, you have to have legal identification. You know, you have to have an ID. And so with so many DMVs being shut down, you have those issues because the next DMV may be 30 miles away from where you live. So how are you able to get there and get these identifications to vote? But one of the things I can see with this current generation is this is a generation that is bold, that will want justice, will seek justice. And the thing is, this is a free generation of young voters. These are the generations that are seeing things that they're like, I don't like it and I'm going to change it. And they're not afraid. Even when you look at business and companies now, you have young adults that will walk off the job because they do not feel like they are being heard.
Correct.
So this generation is not only making sure that you hear them with their votes, they're actually becoming candidates on these ballots. And they're actually surpassing people and being elected in seats where there has been a Republican or Democratic person there for 20 plus years, and they are unseating them and taking over these roles. So they're looking at their votes or how that matters, but they're also looking like, I'm going to be on this ballot as well.
Okay. So for me, I mean, not for me, but question I have is I have young black guys that say, well, my vote don't count. Or they feel like their voice is not being heard, so there's no need, or they looking at, look at, what is going on in our communities, and we're getting promises and things to happen, and they get our vote, but they don't follow through. How would you, that's a two-sided question. So the first side, how would you, what is your rebuttal to someone that think that their vote doesn't matter, and that's the reason why they don't go out and vote as a black you person?
Well, my response is, well, when you didn't vote, what changed?
Well, yeah.
You know, so when you didn't do it, what changed? You can always say you did it. It may not have worked out in your favor, but you did it. You took some type of action instead of being there sitting on the sideline. It's just like with sports, and that's sometimes how I talk to young males. Anything. Okay, you want to get out there on the court, right? And let's say your coach is only giving you 30 seconds to make whatever play it is. That's all you have. And then right after that, you might get on the bench. But if you improve in those 30 seconds, that matters. You may get more time. So it's just like with voting. If you sit on that bench, you're never going to be able to prove yourself. But if you get those 30 seconds and you're able to prove yourself and keep going, then you're able to get more time. And that's what voting is. Voting is a chance to prove that you are a citizen, are looking at what people are doing. Because if you don't like whoever's in office, you can vote them out. The only thing that we cannot vote people out is the Supreme Court justice. That is it. Everything else is the citizens' vote. We hold the power. But the problem is we're not holding them accountable.
So now we're going to the second part of that question. So for them, well, I voted for so-and-so because they came in our community and they held this they held a, town hall meeting, and we were able to ask questions and converse back and forth together. And our candidate has made promises to us, but once we got them in the office, we didn't see it come back.
So it's almost the easiest way I can say is almost like, I don't want to say a double-edged sword, but it kind of is, because not every politician is going to be able to complete every promise that they want to.
Correct.
And again, just like with presidents make promises all of the time. In their first 4 years, the joke is they're trying to make sure they get elected a second time. And that's where you see some of those impacts. But again, it's about what are you willing to do. If you don't like what a politician does, then I guarantee you, if you create a hashtag, it's just like creating a letter. And that's for younger generation, because if you make a hashtag Shakia is not doing what we said, and then you list that down, I guarantee you're going to see that, because it's going to start trending. And enough people in that community is going to start trending, because again, it's about the communication that you have. And if you're able to communicate your frustration and say, Mr. Kia, you said you're going to put this park here on this day. It's 20 days past. What are you going to do? What's the hold up? Explain to us. You need to talk to us, because we are your hiring managers. And that's how you need to look at it. You are human resources. You're the one looking at the resumes. You're the one checking their experience. You're the one doing this. And if you don't like them, you vote them out, or in instances, President Trump says, you're fired. So that's how you do it.
So when we talk about voter suppression, we know, well, first off, do you think that it's still today?
Yes.
Okay. Now, because I believe it too. Okay. So we're in agreement with voter suppression. What ways are they suppressing us now?
So I mentioned earlier DMVs. Again, you have to have some type of valid ID, whether it's a passport or whatever it is. If you shut down DMVs, how are you able to get a valid driver's license? There are so many DMVs being shut down or being merged together that count other people out. Now, Birmingham is one of the lucky cities because you have enough DMVs that people can go to. But places that are very rural, like Selma or even smaller towns than that, they have a hard time getting to those DMVs. So DMVs and not getting licensed is another way. Another way that I believe personally is the language that is being used on these ballots are very, very confusing to even the most highly educated person and even those that aren't. And I believe the language of the people, and I've always been told, the smartest person in the room is the person that can talk to everybody.
Right, correct.
Whether that is verbally, whether that is written down, and that's very important, is that the language to me seems like it's so much mumbo jumbo that it's hard for people to understand what they're voting for, and it's intimidating. When I first voted in 2009, I believe, I went with my dad. But the thing that intimidated me was, I was like, what am I voting for? Even though I knew what the ballot was, when I got there, I was just like, I just want to vote for the president. I don't want to vote for all of this because I don't know what any of that means. So it's intimidating, and some people don't even want to go back.
Right.
And that's the thing that we have that I consider suppression.
So what about our community? We have people that have a felony record. Do they have the right to vote? So you have the right to appeal for your rights back through Montgomery. Okay. So that's through your state capital. She said Montgomery because we're here in Alabama.
Yes. So you have to go through Montgomery to file the petition. Okay. Some states like Florida are actually giving felons the right to vote. Okay. Now I believe there are still some restrictions of those that cannot vote, but you can always appeal. And the first time I ever heard it was actually through T.I. Okay. T.I. was being asked, you can't vote because you're a felon. He said, well, who told you that? Yeah. And he was like, no, I went and did my paperwork, and I was able to get my rights back. And so that's something that people have to be aware that if you are a felon, you can get your rights back by going through the proper channels. And that's for us, again, is going through
taking the time to do it. Yeah. Some of us is because we don't know to do it.
Correct. You don't know how to do it, and it's something now that's becoming talked about with Florida reinstating so many felons' rights to vote. Okay. So that's going to be an interesting state to see from now on, because Florida is what I would consider a swing state, because it could be blue one month, it could be red the next. So with felons being able to get their rights to vote, it's going to be a real turning point in a lot of elections
to see what it's going to look like. Okay. So let's talk about the ballot, the ballots. I'm sorry. Because because it is confusing, and if you hadn't done it plenty of times, you don't know. Some people say that you have to vote all one party. You can't mix it up, or you can't, because I identify with this right here. I believe with this candidate, but I like this candidate for this issue. So on the ballot, can you explain the ballot to us?
So on the ballots, and depending on what you're voting for, so historically I have voted on one party side. Okay. I have not mixed it, so I wouldn't be able to speak to that as much. Okay. But I do believe there are options. One place that I would definitely think that people need to go to is a website called Woke Vote that will give you a little bit more information on how to two-party vote if that is an option. So I don't want to speak on that much. Yes. But there are websites, and again, I recommend you go to a website called Woke Vote. And again, I would definitely call your voter areas.
Okay. So speaking of, we're getting ready to vote in November. It's going to be a turning point for us one way or the other. So what to register to vote, because we need to make sure as many of our people are registered to vote as possible. What is do you know the date of when it is the ending to actually be registered to vote?
So I don't know the exact date. Again, you can check Woke Vote in other areas, but anytime we're voting, I know absentee ballots and stuff like that, a lot of things are confusing, and it's still confusing for a lot of people that are experiencing it, because this is a big election, so there's so much information going out. So I do highly recommend you looking at websites like Woke Vote, or the Democratic Party has their own voter registration, the Republican Party has theirs. A lot of third parties have websites too, so I definitely highly recommend you doing research on that within those categories.
Okay, so what is one thing you would say to that young person that is out there and we're getting ready to vote? What advice would you give them?
If you like your freedom, if you want to be a productive member of society, you have to vote. There is nothing else to do, is nothing else to discuss. You can rant and rave, you can write as many letters as you want, but until you hold your elected officials accountable by voting them in or voting them out, you don't have a right to say anything. And what I mean by you don't have a right to say anything is because your right was that ballot. So you're speaking out, you're saying these things. That's all great, and I support that for whatever side you are on. But I really believe that voting is the way to do it. And for this younger generation, we're seeing so many great things from them, from protests to rallies to them speaking up on behalf of social injustice. The way to make those impact is to get out and vote. Keep doing what you're doing, but in order to make them really listen to you, you have to put it on paper. It did not happen unless it's on paper.
And there you have it, queens. Miss Cortney has added another jewel to our crown. Hey, make sure you get out in November and vote. We are needing you. We are counting on you. Let's go vote. Until next week.
Bye.
Queens, we want to connect with you. So reach out and let us know who you want to see on the show. Drop your ideas in the comments. See you next week where we're adding another jewel to your crown.